Hey guys, it's Sally Hendrick here. I've got Elaine with me, and we are going to talk about white fragility. We are actually in our second discussion about this. We're going over a couple of chapters at a time, and today is about chapters 3 and 4, which we both have completed. So, how are you doing, Elaine?
Doing great, doing great. Been busy this weekend, but it's been good. You?
Yeah, good. It's been nice. We've got some plants and such that are finally
I,
producing fruit.
I saw that.
Yes. Well, not fruit, but
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
vegetables, whatever. And
Yeah.
so I'm excited about that. And
Yeah.
we were going to get a couple more things to add out here. We need a bigger pot for our rosemary. So
You were joking about honey bee farmer.
oh, I know. Wouldn't it be kind of cool if we
It
could
would be
have
kind of
an
cool.
apiary on the roof here?
That would be really cool. That would be cool. But
Of course, I would have to go by the homeowners association.
yeah, yeah,
We'll have
yeah.
to see. I don't know if people would be too keen on that, but
Well, I thought it sounded really neat. Just the concept of
yeah,
fantastic.
if we did. It would have to be small, and it would have to be pretty self-contained, and as far as like how to work it. So someone did give me a great link for that
Okay.
to look at one that somebody had, and like I don't even know. I don't know anything about it.
We have some people that we know that are beekeepers, but they're out like more rural locations, and
Yeah.
they're they're all about it. So yeah, it seems like it could be very involved.
So the last time we talked, it's been what, 2 weeks?
I think so. Two
Okay.
weeks. It sounds
So
about right.
2 weeks ago, we talked about the first couple of chapters. Very deep conversation. We had 4 or 5 people on, and we really went through a lot of it. Now, I took notes again. I tend to go out and walk while I'm listening to the book, and but it is so there's so many points to it that I stop and take notes. Like, I'm sure people look at me and they think I'm crazy. But basically, chapters 3 and 4 are talking mostly about after the civil rights movement, what are some of the concepts and ideas and things that have happened in the whole race discussion. And the first concept was colorblind racism.
Right.
And what I wanted to mention was, just to get us started, basically, if you don't notice race, then if we don't notice race, then we dismiss the abuse that Black people have been subjected to: slavery, lunch counter sit-ins, police brutality. Now that discrimination is illegal after the civil rights movement, the treatment of Black people has been moved. Well, it's always been in our systems, but it's been, it just has evolved into a different level of racism, and basically not acknowledging that there is difference in race, and saying that you're colorblind as a white person basically reduces MLK Jr.'s work to expose the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't see race, then how can you identify racism? You
Right.
can't. If you can't challenge racism, it will persist in those who do, have bad thoughts towards Black people. And if you deny the color, you deny the colorful experience that another race has.
Oh yeah, and there was I thought was interesting where it was in the talking about the colorblind racism. What I had highlighted was the pretense that she did not notice this other person's race, assumed he was just like her, and in so doing projected her reality on him. It's just it totally quite
Right. It basically dismisses the experience of the other person. And no two people are going to have the same experience. It's kind of like saying to someone, well, I was sexually abused. And then the other person tries to say, well, what did you do to make that happen?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you're just like dismissing their entire perspective of their actual experience. And you're putting up a block to not allow them to feel what they've felt.
Right. Taking away their voice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, like, have you experienced this in your daily life, with any of your friends or family? Because you're married to a black man.
Yeah, been married.
So I would say that you've had definitely a different experience than me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's so funny. I don't know if you would almost it happens. It probably still happens, but I almost think it's like a concept sometimes of desensitization. You get so used to it that you come up with your response to be like, blah, 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 blah. And then just, it kind of is still wrong, but you got to pick your battles, it seems like. Because, but yeah, there's definitely been times, and more, unfortunately, more so recently, where there were some things that happened where, folks were totally dismissing the whole experience of, systemic racism, and that I don't see color and this and that. And based on, like, maybe I would have posted an article and they just took the headline of the article and then argued it down. But then when you point it out to them, you didn't even read the article. Oh, okay. Now I understand. Yeah, it's fine. And then they totally shut down. It's like, oh, okay. And they just totally dismiss because they don't want to hear it because I think it makes them uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the other part of it too. The second part of chapter 3 was talking about aversive racism. This is something where educated people tend to exhibit this. It's kind of like a subconscious thing. It's subtle and insidious. If someone says, "I have friends of color," and judge them by the character, by their character, not by their skin color, when you rationalize that in our workplaces, and so on and so forth. Oh, wait, no, I was saying rationalizing. Sometimes we rationalize that our workplaces are mostly white because black people don't apply. And that's has been proven to simply just not be true.
Right. And like, I can remember that, and as far as the aversive, there was a situation I remember. There was and I think sometimes people will forget that if you're in a relation, well, at least I feel like it should, is me being in a relationship with a black man for close to 30 years, you're intimately aware of things. At least you should be. I'm not trying to make a generalization, but more aware, more in tune, sensitive. And I remembered someone saying one of those types of things where you're talking about the aversive racism, where they were talking about the other side of town, or it was a side and was dealing with maybe Hispanics or Latina, and how she was scared for her daughter to be over in this particular part of town. And I just remember, so you think that your daughter's at greater risk of being sexually assaulted because she's in this part of town? You think that they're singling her out? And then she immediately was, well, no, but just, you know what I mean? I'm like, well,
it's a perception, and it's one that has been lifted up systemically for years and years and years. It was, in fact, a very specific strategy that was used after the end of slavery. The strategy that was used was to make people think that black men would attack white women, to give this perception that they were dangerous. And but it really was not. I mean, in the numbers, it just wasn't the case. In the book, the author was saying that this white family had bought a home for like $25,000, and basically said that they needed to buy a gun. They had bought in a black neighborhood, but they did not name race as the factor. They were denying that. It was in New Orleans. And then when she was confronted about it, the narrative changed to, why are you moving there? Somebody was saying, why are you moving there? Oh, I don't want you to live far away. And totally backtracked from the race part of the conversation, and tried to deny that it had anything to do with the neighborhood having mostly black people in it. And then it went on to say white people perceive danger when thinking of black people. That's an immediate thought. And this is most people, not all, but most. And white people rarely consider how sheltered their experience is. They believe that they're superior and have to deny it to fit into society, to not be called out for it. And then the other situation was, she said, we can't challenge our own racist filters if we deny that they even exist.
Right. That's
And
crazy.
people say that if someone is a good person, then they can't possibly be racist. So you could have someone that's like always telling jokes and what have you, and then they might get called out for it, but then somebody else will say, "Oh, but he didn't mean it that way. He didn't mean it that way. He was being, he's a good person." And to say that a good person can't also be racist is then making an excuse.
Right. It's like it's an either or. You can't, and I found that very fascinating. I'm like, okay, well, it's not either or. You can be both. They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah. No, they're not. I mean, you think about it, it's like, well, you've got people who are good people, right? But then you realize, the societal pressures are that they still have these feelings and thoughts about other races.
Right.
And whenever they have that you are it's racism doesn't necessarily mean, oh, this is a bad person.
It's not a bigot. It's also insidious and subversive, that because of and it's just fascinating how this is, there's an indoctrination that has taken place throughout, generations. It gets passed on, and it's just so, because it's not discussed, it's taken for granted, and it's just become a part of the fabric. It's just there. And this is funny. I'm remembering, this is just a tiny aside story, that where I was raised is economically depressed part of town, where I was the minority, and I went to school in a affluent part of town where I was the majority. So I had this very interesting juxtaposition of everything, class, socioeconomic privilege, all this stuff was all just a mishmash. And I remember that people I didn't have friends who typically wanted to come visit me, but when they did, and they lived in this other part of town, they were scared to come to my part of town because of these impressions and the things. And, my parents lived there until most recently. So you're talking, they lived there like 50 years. And yes, it was economically depressed, if that's the right word, but it was, they didn't have any problems with crime. There wasn't, it was, there wasn't any problem. I'm not saying it was idyllic, but you didn't have the image that was created where people, I had a friend one time who wanted to come over, and he was like, "Oh, I'm worried about my car. Will it be safe?" I'm like, yes, your car will be safe.
Yeah, your car will be safe.
So that's kind of one of those things where
Camille's watching this. Hey.
Hey. And I'm sorry if I'm jerking. My cat is biting my foot. Sorry.
No. That happened to us at one point. One of my daughters was dating a boy that lived in a certain part of town in Nashville,
right,
that is economically depressed. There are more people of color, not just Black people, but Hispanics, Latinos, and also Laotian and other, Indian, whatever. There's just lots of Vietnamese, lots of people that live in that part of town. And my daughter was going over there for dinner with his family, and something was said to us by someone else, like,
they were fine people.
You're going to let her go over there.
Yeah, right.
And it was like, yes. I've been to people's homes in the area. I have had friends that have lived there before they were able to actually move to another area where maybe, you know, it was a little bit less economically depressed. But, what's funny about it is that when my husband worked in the prison system, he learned a lot about things. And he basically said people who live in economically depressed areas don't mess with the people in their neighborhood. If they're going to do a crime, they go somewhere else.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. They're not good because it's economically depressed. It doesn't make sense. They're not going to steal because you don't have anything to steal.
Yeah. Well, it's not just that, but it's like when you buy when you have a puppy and you're training the puppy and you train it in a kennel or something for at night, and they don't mess in the kennel, but if you leave them out, they'll go somewhere and find some place in the house.
It's the same concept.
Pee in your own bed.
Yeah, you just don't. Yeah, exactly.
No, dogs don't. People don't. It's just the way it is. So,
but people who don't know, and again, it's part of what do you call it? The stereotypes, the generalizations, and all the things. They have these ideas. I'm like, that's not reality.
I mean, obviously, there are going to be exceptions to what we're saying. Always, there's going to be exceptions. But I was reading in the book, they were talking about, this may have even been in the 4th chapter, that basically, whenever they would look at the statistics of these particular neighborhoods where people just made the assumption that they were more dangerous, that the statistics absolutely did not hold true. And even when white people were presented with the statistics to show them there is no more crime here than there is in this particular area that you're even talking about, and they even knew it, they still kept the same sentiment about it.
It's fascinating. Now,
denial about real numbers.
Yeah, it's like science.
Science.
Yeah, we could do that. Could be a whole other.
That's a different conversation.
Yes. I thought that this was interesting too. This was actually still back in chapter 3. I had underlined the study about the what was it? The 626 white college students. They kept journals and recorded every instance of racial issues, images, and understanding they observed in 6 to 8 weeks, and they recorded more than 7,500 accounts of blatant racist comments and actions by the white people in their lives. And it provided empirical evidence that racism continues to be explicitly expressed by whites, even those who are young and profess to be progressive.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
What about from the black person's perspective? Was that recorded as well? Do you remember that?
No, I think that it was a study that says it was based on the practices of millennials, and so I guess the study was just white college students. So they must have just been wanting to see what do white people say around other white people, and so this is just because typically speaking, white people have that different thing. Like they'll know how to self-censor.
I mean, it's definitely different. Somebody told me the other day that they were going out to eat with someone, and they were having to wait on a table, and they were not happy about it because the place was practically empty. But here we are in the middle of COVID. They've got regulations they have to follow. It's like, sorry, we only have so many people working and so many tables available. But this person literally said under their breath, "Oh, I bet if we were black, we'd get seated right away."
I just can't even.
Yeah.
I just can't.
And that's in Tennessee.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I know it could be anywhere, but I'm just letting you know.
We can only talk about
happened this week. And it just shows, and that person said it under their breath to another white person. And made this general assumption. This is also someone who says that the virus is a hoax and that whatever. Because so you've got a whole picture of mentality of this type of person anyway, which is really unfortunate.
Very unfortunate
because of the things that are happening. But what can you do? That's just the way it is. Okay, so I wanted to go in. Chapter 4 is called "How Does Race Shape the Lives of White People?"
Right.
I had several notes on this.
Yeah.
We as white people don't need to know our history in order to survive.
Right.
Black people do. If they don't have the learnings of their past, they really have no blueprint for survival.
No.
And that was just kind of the sentiment I got from that. We also have a sense of belonging.
Right.
When we're born white, we're given good health care. And think about in the past, when we had white hospitals and black people were not allowed into them and only had care when a white doctor would step up to help, or black midwives and herbalists would take care of them.
Right. And I thought it was really tough.
I read that somewhere else, but it just brought that up to me.
Oh yeah.
Reading
Well,
that.
in this where they're talking about, you just see all the examples. Like it said, when my parents talked about the white parents reading the birthing manuals, the pictures depicted white families. You know, everything with their white identity, everything was based upon that, and they didn't have to worry about how they would be treated by the hospital staff because of the color of their skin. And it just, the very context in which you entered the world was organized hierarchically by color of skin. It's just, I was highlighting this as wow, all about the belonging. And
well, and you think about it, it's like we don't ever have to think about our experience as a white person in our lives. We just walk around as us.
Yeah.
But if you're a black person, it is definitely something that you have to think about in how you move forward in your life. There's always something that reminds you of what color you are.
Yeah, that you're different, that you're not the majority, or you know, whatever the right term I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Well, the perceived supreme race.
Yeah. Right.
Let's see, what was the other thing? Oh, one of the things that I wanted to bring up too, you know, I had experience in evaluating malpractice lawsuits for hospitals, lots of hospital systems. Hello, who is that? RJ Castile?
I don't see any.
Who that is. Hey. I have had lots of hospital, I mean, not hospital, but I didn't mean to put that up on the screen, but hey. Lots of experience evaluating lawsuits for malpractice. And basically, what I wrote was, white people do tend to be given better care within a hospital setting. Lawsuits, though, are often waged by white people using white lawyers against hospitals and doctors for money to cover basically medical expenses or any kind of damages related to any malpractice lawsuits. Black people are less likely to win their cases as they are preconceived to already be at fault, even when they are not, when they're put in front of like a jury or whatever with a case like that. And so they are less often supported by attorneys who are willing to take on their cases. Let's see, what else did I say? Oh, as far as the role models are concerned, it's really, really rare for a white person to not feel like they belong. And whenever they are in a situation like that, it's often surprising to them. Let's see, white people are usually warned of an all-black neighborhood or a situation as if the minority is scary. And white people don't normally ever have to think about this, so it's harder for us to understand the black experience. And George Zimmerman, for example, the guy in Florida, would never have stopped a white boy in a hoodie. He automatically assumed that Trayvon Martin was up to go no good with his Skittles.
Yeah. Skittles and tea. Yeah.
Skittles and tea. Yeah. I said Skittles and pop, but it was tea, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think it was like something like a Snapple, you know, bottle tea.
Yeah. Yeah. Something like that.
Well, you know, and I remember, and it's true, but I found these things out just I would say more happenstance as it ties into the the relationship that I've been with him for going on 30 years. When we first were together, I joined a church that he had been a member of, and that became our church home.
Mm-hmm.
And that was I would say 97% Black church.
Mm-hmm.
But it was maybe it may have been because of my background in my neighborhood, being accustomed to being in the minority. It wasn't an issue for me being the minority there. A matter of fact, I have recollections because I was there for 17 years. I chuckle when I look back at it because I didn't think about it so much at the time, but I was this little white girl, this all Black church. I was singing on 2 choirs up there in my little robe, doing my little thing. Not really that good, but it was a joyful noise. And then I was also, for a couple of years there, I was a Sunday school teacher of the senior adults there. And I think for the most part, I was well received and well liked. And sometimes how I would do is to make the icebreaker when I would see folks is I would draw attention to the fact that I was the odd one out. And I would have them say, "Oh, we don't see you as you're not white." And I was just like, "No, it's okay. I don't mind. I know I'm white. It's fine. It doesn't bother me a bit." But it's
Well, that's a denial in the reverse, I guess, if you will.
But they were trying. The thing was, is what they were trying to do is they were trying to be so kind in those early years. They were trying to be so kind to make sure. And I thought that was just so ironic that for the most part, folks were bending over backwards, going out of their way to make sure that I felt comfortable and welcome, when I don't know if the reverse, if that would have taken place. You know what I'm saying? If I had been the single Black person in
coming into an all-white church. Well, and that was another point made in the book too, that the most segregated experience in our lives is at high noon on
Sundays. Right.
And that we are separated. We are in separate churches for the most part. And that right there tells you where the heart is.
Mm-hmm.
That's very telling. Gosh, I took a lot of notes. Oh my goodness. That's a lot of notes that I took. I wanted to make sure that we covered a lot of this. I guess, we pretty much covered a lot of, there was this, I don't know if it was the author and a friend of hers who was Black, but they were in Idaho. Maybe it was an example she was saying, but they were basically in Idaho and they were going somewhere.
To the diversity training that they were doing?
No, it was to a lake.
Okay. Yes, I do remember that. And the Black woman, she was like, "That's not comfortable for me."
Yeah, it was near a community that is like this Aryan community.
Yes.
That believes in this whole white supremacy and the Aryan race and all of this. And it was nearby that community.
Yes.
And
Hayden Lake.
The white,
and Hayden Lake. Freedom of movement is what was being covered. Yes.
Yeah. And the woman that was taking her Black friend, she was just like, "Oh, I never even considered that." And she was like, "Yeah, I don't even want to be in that situation where anything potentially could happen." And we as a race just don't even have to think about things like that. Mm-hmm. To be able to go into a place like that. And then the other thing that I thought was very interesting was when you talk about a situation, if you're describing it and you're talking about the people in it, if you're a white person, whenever there's a Black person that comes up in the story, or a Hispanic person, or an Asian person, or whatever that is, do you use the descriptor word to describe who's there in the story?
I stopped probably several years back because because it was one of those things when you start kind of reflect. I was like, "Why is that?"
You think about that. It's like, was that description word necessary to tell that story?
Absolutely, yes.
Did it change the story?
Yeah, and so that was something I think that I was just as guilty of that. But that's something, when you start becoming aware, you consciously have to be mindful and intentional of checking yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not, what's the word? It's not germane to the topic. It doesn't add to or take away. If you're just,
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing if you want to describe what a group looks like, so you
right.
can get a picture in your mind.
Yes.
But if you're just trying to describe the happenings of the story, does it make any difference that this person was Asian or Black or Hispanic or whatever?
Right. Exactly. That was, yes, that is very fascinating. It's true. It's true.
And then it was also mentioned, do you consider Toni Morrison a writer? Or do you consider Toni Morrison a Black writer? And so when you're looking for references about writing,
right,
do you only bring up Toni Morrison if you're trying to bring up a Black perspective? Mm-hmm. Or do you ever bring her up just as an author?
Right. Yeah.
Yes? No?
I have thought I identify her as a Black author, because of the experiences that she speaks to. But it is interesting because, do you have to? I mean, can she not just be recognized within her craft?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you really have to know her race to be able to use her writing as inspiration or
right, to appreciate it.
Of an idea or theory?
Yeah. Now, I think sometimes what'll end up happening too, and this, I don't think this is necessarily off topic, but sometimes I think people will mention the race of a person to try to show that they're, what's the phrase, that they're woke or that they're informed. So they'll try to go through all the lists, which, I mean, it is good that you need to know, but I don't think that you need that. What is the phrase I've heard? Virtue signaling. You don't need to sit there and just pat yourself on the back. It's like, oh, I know all these Black authors, Yeah.
Right. The section that, let's see, it looks like there were two sections in chapter 4 I wanted to mention. One was called White Solidarity, and the other was called White Racial Innocence. So White Solidarity, this is where people try to protect their white advantage, basically to not call someone out for something that they do that is racist. You make an excuse for them, you're silent, you don't speak up, you don't break rank, because, I mean, think about it. If you're at work or if you are in at a family dinner or function and something is said or done that's offensive or just inappropriate, if you just kind of like tuck tail and ignore it, then that is keeping quiet and perpetuating that it's okay.
Yeah.
But if you do step up and break rank, you are subject to be criticized or ostracized.
Mm-hmm. That happens. Yes. Or they don't feel comfortable talking to you anymore, because when they recognize that they're like, oh. So then if they're talking in one way, as soon as you approach, they change subjects.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I definitely have family members that are like that around me.
Yes,
so,
me too.
It does remind, I had a side note that said, reminds me of women speaking out about sexual abuse in the military. Mm-hmm. And basically, if you've got other men who know what's going on, but they are not saying anything or stepping up, or if a woman is even being silent about her own abuse, that there's a complicity with that.
Yes. It is. Yeah. That says here, it's like, silence is not benign because it protects and maintains a racial hierarchy and my place within it. Each uninterrupted joke furthers the circulation of racism through the culture, and the ability for the joke to circulate depends on my complicity. Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to be the one that steps up and calls something out. And the reason it's hard is because usually those situations will trigger emotions. Yeah. And if that triggers your emotions and you're not able to get your words together or your composure to be able to say something, it makes it really difficult. So I think that it really takes practice to know what to say,
Right.
to know
How to say it.
how to say it. I mean, like I've had people say things to me before, and I stop them, and I'm just like, look, I'm not comfortable with this,
Yeah.
and you're just going to have to know that about me, and so I need you to stop.
Yeah. I know that
And
I've
if you don't, then I just walk away.
yeah, I know in similar times I have done different things. This has been more sometimes along the political realm that there has been sometimes this has not happened so much recently, but maybe several years back, a different administration, but whatever the case was, there were folks of the more conservative parties who were just kind of railing about Democrats. It was a Republican Democrat type of thing, and I just remembered this, and I just remembered coming up to the person. I said, "Dude, you know me, right? You know that. I mean, it may know me for like 5 minutes. You pretty much know that I'm about as liberal as they come. So can you not do that?" And then it's like, oh. And then I had this one person. What's the phrase they use? Mansplaining. I had this one person. I'll never forget it because I was several years younger, but I mean, I wasn't a child. And this person had said something about me being Democrat in my political affiliation or whatever to try to get him to stop what he was doing. So then he pulls me aside. He says, "Come here," and he does like this: sit, 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 sit. I'm like, oh, geez, I'm getting ready to be mansplained. I didn't know that phrase at the time, but I knew this was coming. Yeah. And he proceeds to ask me this series of questions. 4 or 5 questions, apparently, that there's a litmus test on whether or not you're Democrat or Republican based upon how you answer these questions. Okay.
Okay.
So I don't remember the questions. It's just the point of the fact is that and so I answered the questions and he just looked at me, put his hands on his lap and says, "Well," and I'm like, "Yeah, what?" He said, "You really are a Democrat."
But I hate that description.
But I mean, at that point he was saying that, and I said, "Well, I said that I was," and it was this weird type of a backhanded compliment that he thought he was giving me. He said, "No, but what you don't understand is that most people who say they believe this way, you ask them those questions and they answer them the opposite." So it was like he was surprised that I had thought.
The same way with Republicans.
Yeah,
you ask certain questions to Republicans and they will answer to you for specific things that will be the opposite.
Yeah.
It's the same for everybody though.
Yeah, but it was so bizarre.
Here's the situation though when it comes to politics, and then I want to move on from that.
Absolutely.
But, I like to sit in the middle and listen to both sides of arguments, look at all different angles of what's going on. Definitely, I'm into the science. I've been a scientist since 1992, probably since birth. And, so I'm going to go into the science, obviously, the data, whatever, the numbers. I'm going to also not have an argument with someone who, I don't know. I would say that if they don't read past the headline, it can be really obvious. You can tell when someone only goes this deep, and if they can't come back and talk with you in a deeper fashion or know anything about what's going on,
curious to understand.
Yeah, then I'm not going to have that conversation with that person because it's not going to go any deeper than
a waste of energy.
Yeah,
it really is. But I thought that was just interesting with his thing was because the way that I handled that particular situation, even though I had to go through that when he's mansplaining or whatever he was doing, after that, I never heard any more discussions with an earshot or in my presence about political stuff. And he didn't talk to me anymore, after which was okay. It was all right. I mean, hi bye, but yeah.
Goodness. All right, so let's talk about this when we talk about history and the viewpoint of history from the white perspective versus the black perspective. When you talk about black history, you've got slavery, indentured servitude, Chinese exclusion, and also other colors, Chinese exclusion laws, Japanese internment, sharecropping, inferior schools, bias laws, mass incarceration, cultural erasures, attacks and mockeries. But when you talk about white history,
Mm-hmm.
none of that applies
No.
to us.
No.
And we also tend to whitewash what happened in history to excuse things or to dampen them down,
Yeah.
to not remember them, or to not enhance, give them the attention that they actually deserve. White history is easy to know. Black history is hard to acknowledge. And if we don't, though, it means we're excusing it and dampening it to make us feel better
Right.
as a race.
Right.
Now, then she went into, and this is really telling here too, you've got the white elite that have distributed wealth towards eight men who have the same amount of wealth as 50% of the world's population combined.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
8 men. You've got 2015 Sri Lanka's GDP, gross domestic product, was $82 billion. You've got Iceland's was 16 billion. Luxembourg's was somewhere in between, maybe in the 50s.
Uh-huh.
And basically 180 countries around the world have less wealth combined of the entire countries than the top U.S. companies.
Yes. Shocking. And it says here, of the world's 10 richest people, 9 are white men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, when it comes to problems that we have, the white elite tends to divert blame to immigrants and poor people, and it's messaging that has caused white flight. It's caused busing for desegregation after Brown versus Board of Education. You've got basically, here's the other situation: white kids were never bused to black neighborhoods. It was always the opposite.
Yes.
And it was always an inconvenience to the black population to get the services that they deserved as citizens of this country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then also, white positions are basically considered universal, but they're not. They're not universal.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the last bit was white racial innocence. And this is where a lot of us will position ourselves as being innocent and sheltered from the racial discussion. Black people learn about racism via everyday life and via policies that keep them out of neighborhoods, policies, unspoken policies these days because they're illegal, but very blatant ones in the past. Black people have to talk about race on white people's terms.
Yep.
They have to take the steps to, they are considered responsible in taking the steps to erase it, but they have the least amount of power to make changes that will erase it.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, and I finally found my notes about the crime stats do not prove that black neighborhoods are any more dangerous, but the perception remains.
Yeah.
Also, when it comes to crimes, you will have the same exact crimes committed, but for a white person will blame others. They will blame a situation, and then they will get lenient.
External factors.
Yes.
When it's a black person.
Yes, it's kind of like blaming somebody else because you ran out of toilet paper. And yeah. And then and people, there is literally an assumption that black people feel less pain. And that blacks and Latinos are not given the same compassion of external situations and are assumed to be animalistic by nature.
Right. Did you ever read the book was years ago. Don't remember the author. Medical Apartheid.
No.
It was a book
You're
about
kind of scaring me there.
yay thick, and it spoke when you're talking about feeling less pain, and it talked about all the advances and at what cost to Black people. And when reading, it was just like this litany of all the stuff that happened, not just Tuskegee with the things we know about, but just everything. And talk about, just being shook when you're reading that, and but that's what made me think of it when it says Blacks feel less pain, and that was used as a justification.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of was the overarching thing is you can understand why there's a mistrust of the medical field when it comes to Black people receiving care, because they didn't receive the same quality of care. Oftentimes, they were the guinea pigs, and so yeah, it's just it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the other things that was mentioned was that Black people are required to go to schools that ignore Black history in the textbooks. Whites choose because the white people that are choosing the textbooks,
Right.
or whatever, white people choose segregation and have the economy to do so, meaning that or the economic ability to do so. It's like they will leave an area, the white flight situation. I already talked about the classification of good versus bad neighborhoods.
Yeah.
We are also seldom encouraged to build cross-racial relationships. We are seldom encouraged to work with people of color or in any situation.
Mm-hmm. True. True.
And even as children, we're not encouraged to get to know other people. It's not something that typically happens.
And I can remember as a youth, I don't know. I think I've always been, I had this childlike curiosity at a very, very young age that I don't know. I mean, I don't remember consciously doing this, but it just seemed like I have very clear elementary school recollections where the person that was the most unique, like Vietnamese, Asian, Latina, they were the ones that I just was like, pew, and it was just, I wanted, even if there was the different language or the different foods, I enjoyed that. And
Mhm.
I remember that was something that wasn't necessarily discouraged, but I remember I was perceived as being very odd that I didn't stick with my own, I guess. I don't know. But
That's funny too, because you know, ever since, I mean, we've always gone out and eaten at like different ethnic restaurants,
yeah.
and just our thing. We love to eat Indian food, Vietnamese food, Korean, whatever, not just your Chinese takeout. It's
Yeah.
we tend to try different things, Ethiopian food, whatever it may
Yes,
be,
yes, yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
and sushi, etc. And
Yeah.
we also took our kids out with us to try those different things. And what's funny is that there are friends of mine that I have said, okay, let's go to such and such, and we're going to have this Indian food or whatever. And I couldn't tell you how many times that they have said, after they would agree, and they would be like, okay, and then we go with me, and then we're sitting down, and they go, I've never eaten this food before, ever. And I'm just like, oh my God, you've got to be kidding me. I can't believe
Restaurant's been here for 20 years.
Yeah, it's like this is what we always have. And my kids will run into other kids that are the same way. They'll be like, oh, we went to here and so and so's never even been in, this type of restaurant or whatever. And so my kids were having to teach their friends what some of the dishes were and all of that, which I thought was really interesting. It's like, wow, you're really, that's the other thing we're talking about, that she talks about later in the book, is that later in chapter 4, is that we don't even know what experiences we're missing.
Right.
The beautiful experiences that we're missing.
The culture, the food, the taste, the nonverbal communication, it's fun. You know what I'm saying? And to really appreciate the diversity that exists, yeah, you're missing out. You're missing out,
Yeah. I wrote down, a white person often sees that life is full. They often think that life is full when they have no diversity, but they have no experience or knowledge of what they're missing. They assume they lose nothing, but this perpetuates this message of white segregation being good and diversity being bad or unnecessary.
Yeah.
It contributes to a lack of understanding. They think they're exempt from racism. They lack interest in other perspectives, and want immediate solutions that often take deep work and lots of time. It's a complete denial of what's going on.
Right.
Also, we can be raised to believe that the absence of color is a good thing. It's a whitewashing that ignores, dismisses, and perpetuates the problem. And we tend to internalize this and don't even realize that we're doing it. And it's our responsibility to understand how this shapes our perspective and our responses when we're confronted with racial disparity issues.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know how to handle it.
No.
There were several other things, but you know what I'm going to do? Because I've been taking such good notes on this.
Yeah.
I think what I'll do is probably write a couple of blog posts that will summarize our discussions, and then I'll embed the videos there.
I like that.
So that we have this, have this.
I think it needs to be retained. It needs to, I think that is great, especially if you can, the documentation. It's something. It's not just being passed up into the void. It's something tangible. I like that.
All right. Well, I'm going to take my I voted sticker and show you guys. Yes. It is 100 years of women's suffrage, the women's suffrage movement.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, I think, when did early voting start? What was the day? Was it Saturday? Was it last Saturday?
Whatever the 17th was.
Yes, it was. Because that's, we actually went, I don't know if we went Friday or Saturday, but yes, it was good. It was good. It's important.
Okay, for some reason this says I'm in airplane mode. I hope that means that I'm not been offline.
Oh gosh.
I hope never mind. I don't know. My computer's been acting really weird lately.
I know that I don't know if this is anything, but it does say up at the top, it's still keeping track of a timer. What I can see, so hopefully it's being recorded.
Here, but I wonder about online.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
But hey, that's okay. If it's not there, this does record it, and I can download that recording. It's fine.
Good. So. Good. All right.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. If you have anything else you want to mention before we go. No?
Yeah, no, I think we're good. Thank you so much for the dialogue. This was great.
All right. Well, I will figure out what chapters we need to do next. Apparently on the Audible, it gives me the timing of each chapter. So I think the next 4 chapters are really short. So we may do all of those.
Okay. That'd be great.
But it would give us a couple more meetings, and then we'd be done.
All right. Fantastic.
All right. Thank you. See ya.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.